Walt Disney World is roughly the size of San Francisco, and if you are coming to Walt Disney World, you are going to want to know how the transportation works. Today, I am going to cover all of the forms of Disney transportation. We are going to be talking about the buses, the Skyliner, the monorail, the boats, and even more. And there are so many little intricacies that come with all of these forms of Disney transportation that most people don't know. So I'm going to be sharing all of those with you today, along with all of my pro tips so that you can successfully navigate your way around Walt Disney World when you come here on vacation. The best news about Disney World transportation is that it is mostly free to use and anyone can use it, whether you are staying at a Walt Disney World resort or not. So whether you're staying on property or off property, this video will be valuable to you, and by the end, you will know exactly how to navigate the magic.
Enjoy the most magical flight on Earth.
Hello my lovely humans, I'm Kenzie and I am kicking off our video at Disney's Riviera Resort. This resort just so happens to be one of my favorites, and it's also a Disney Skyliner resort as well. So I figured we could kick off our transportation video by talking about Disney's Skyliner system. For those that are not aware, Disney's Skyliner system is their gondola system, and it is free for anybody to use, and again, anybody can use it whether you're staying at a Walt Disney World resort or not. The gondolas hold up to 10 people each, but if you do have an ECV or a wheelchair, it will only hold up to 6 people each. So just keep that in mind. Most of the time you're going to be riding with strangers, which I know some people don't love, but honestly it's not bad and you're not in there for too long, and most people are friendly and it's kind of fun to, meet some other people from other places and all of that as well. During slower times, you typically do get to ride with just your party, so that is nice, but it's not as common. There isn't any air conditioning on the Skyliners, but it does have vents with some passive airflow, and while it's moving, it's pretty comfortable overall. Strollers that are smaller than 30 inches by 48 inches can remain open, and they can just scoot right into the Skyliner and they don't have to be folded down. Your child can ride in them, so that part is definitely really nice. If it is larger though, it will have to be collapsed, so really those double stroller size strollers are the ones that will need to be collapsed. The Skyliner is slow moving and it is very easy to board, so that part is really nice. But if you do have a wheelchair or an ECV, there will be a separate loading area for you, and you'll be able to board a Skyliner that isn't moving at all, just so that you're comfortable, and it makes it a little bit safer for you to hop aboard the most magical flight on Earth. I had to pause for a moment to put my hair up, so that's why I look a little bit different. I'm filming this in the middle of summer in Florida, and it is very roasty toasty, as I like to say. But you may be asking yourself, where does the Skyliner system go? And I'm going to be answering that for you now. There are 5 gondola stations, 3 at Disney resort hotels, and 2 at theme parks. The Epcot station takes you to what is called International Gateway, which is essentially the back of World Showcase in Epcot. And so it doesn't bring you to the front of the park. So that is definitely important information to have. But one huge perk of it bringing you to that part of Epcot is you also have very easy access to Disney's Boardwalk. There are so many fun entertainment options, restaurants, and other resorts to visit in that area as well, and that is a hidden perk of Disney's Skyliner system. The second park that is on Disney Skyliner system is Disney's Hollywood Studios, and that Skyliner station is at the front of Disney's Hollywood Studios, so that one will bring you straight to the front of the park. As far as the resorts on Disney's Skyliner system, the first one I'm going to talk about is Disney's Caribbean Beach Resort. That is a moderate resort here at Walt Disney World, and it is also home to the transfer station. All 3 Skyliner lines that you can take are available at this transfer station, and most likely you will have to transfer at some point to try to get to where you're going, obviously depending on which point you're trying to get to from A to B. There are lots of signs throughout this transfer station to help you know which Skyliner line you need to ride in order to reach point B of wherever you're trying to go. But if you have any questions, there are tons of cast members around and you can ask them as well, just to make sure you are getting on the right one and going to where you want to go. The second resort that is on Disney's Skyliner system, of course, is Disney's Riviera Resort, where I'm at now. And the other 2 resorts that are on the Skyliner are Disney's Art of Animation Resort and Disney's Pop Century Resort. They actually share a Skyliner station as well, and they're right across the bridge from each other, so they are very easily accessible from one another. Up next, let's talk about operating hours. The Skyliner typically operates from about 7:30 a.m. to around 10:30 p.m. or 11 p.m. but exact hours will vary just depending on what park hours are for that day and if there are any special events going on and things like that. In the morning, the Skyliner starts running around 60 to 90 minutes before Epcot and Hollywood Studios open. And in the evening, it typically runs until about an hour or two after park closing. But if there are extended evening hours, it also might remain open later. You can also check the operating hours for the Skyliner for that day as you are boarding. Each station will have a display with each of the hours so that you are aware of what they are that day. You can also ask a cast member at your resort if you want to know. Unfortunately, there's no way to see the hours on the app right now, but hopefully that's something Disney will add in the future. Let's talk about some pros and considerations of Disney's Skyliner system. Some of the biggest pros are how efficient and fast the Skyliner system is. Each line only takes around 3 to 12 minutes to get to whatever destination you're trying to get to. The longest of the lines is when you are going to Epcot, just for your awareness, but all of them are very fast. In fact, it is the quickest way to get from Disney's Hollywood Studios to Epcot or vice versa. So if you do plan on park hopping between those two parks, I definitely recommend taking the Skyliner. It is important to note though that if you do want to park hop, you do need a park hopping ticket or an annual pass in order to do so. Another huge pro is it's super easy to resort hop along the resorts along the Skyliner line. And it's so fun just to explore the different resorts or try out different dining options and all of that. So I highly recommend doing that if you have time during your trip. As far as considerations are concerned, or cons, I like to call them considerations, one thing to note is that the Skyliner will close if there's bad weather in the area. If it's just rain, that's not enough technically to close the Skyliner. But if there is lightning in the area, obviously Disney will close it for safety. You don't want to be in a huge metal box when it's lightning. That would not be a good situation for anybody. And if there are high winds, that's another thing that will potentially close Disney's Skyliner. Another important thing to note is that the lines can get extremely long for the Skyliner, especially at the end of the evening at Epcot and Hollywood Studios when you're trying to potentially get back to your resort or to wherever you parked if you're driving, and it can be a long wait. Another thing to note though is that it can also get long in the morning if you are trying to rope drop or go earlier in the day when everyone else is trying to go as well. Granted, all forms of Disney transportation do get backed up in the evenings and the morning, so this isn't really exclusive to the Skyliner, but it is something to be aware of. So as you can tell, Disney's Skyliner has a lot of pros, and if you are wondering if you should consider staying at a resort along Disney's Skyliner system, then I recommend you check out this video that's linked in the corner after you're done with this video. I recently toured several of the resort rooms, so you can see a little bit more about what you would get if you do choose to stay at one of these resorts.
Hello everyone, and welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Transportation System. Enjoy the ride.
We are about to go board a Disney bus to get to our next location where we can talk about multiple forms of Disney transportation. But before we do that, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about the Disney bus system. Disney buses are the biggest form of transportation at Walt Disney World, and they are located pretty much everywhere. And that's because you can get to pretty much almost anywhere on a Disney bus. They are also free to use, so that is super nice. They're located at all the resorts, all 4 theme parks, the water parks, and Disney Springs. So you really can find them in most locations, which is also super convenient. A lot of the newer buses at Disney World have these really cute wraps on them, and they have like very fun Disney characters on them and other just magical, whimsical Disney things. And so that really adds to the overall magical bus experience, which is wonderful. They also have charging ports in some of the new buses and Wi-Fi, which is also super convenient if you need it. If you have a stroller, you do have to fold down the stroller in order to board the bus. So I always do recommend that if you have a little one in a stroller as the bus is pulling up, make sure you get them out of the stroller and make sure you take anything else out that might fall out during that experience of folding the stroller and getting into the bus. That's a little pro level tip for you. And if you have an ACV or wheelchair, you can also take the Disney bus. There are limited number of available spots for those individuals who need those accommodations. But the good news is you can take the bus. If there are multiple people waiting though that have a wheelchair or ECV, you might have to wait for a couple of buses until you can board. The buses typically start running anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour before early theme park entry begins, which is super nice because it will give you enough time to get to the parks for early theme park entry if you would like to be there for that. However, I do recommend that you get to the bus stop around 90 minutes early if you do want to be there in time for early theme park entry, just because it's a really popular time for people to be at the bus stop and you're going to want to be one of the first people in line. As far as the end times are concerned for when the Disney buses stop running, Disney officially says that it's an hour after park closing, but I will tell you that we have definitely gotten on a bus a lot later than an hour after park closing. If you do get on a ride right as the park's closing, for example, or if you're doing some shopping or you have like a late dining reservation, definitely go to the bus station to check if they're still running. Most of the time they still will be, and you'll be in luck as long as you're being somewhat reasonable, I would say, overall. The Disney buses arrive at least every 20 minutes during peak times, so that part is really nice. Peak times is basically anything where it's going to be more crowded. So think about in the morning when everyone's trying to get to the parks, and in the evening when everyone's trying to get back to their resorts. If you are trying to catch a bus at a non-peak time, it's possible you potentially could wait longer than 20 minutes. So just make sure you plan accordingly. If you are at a resort bus station and you are waiting for a bus, there will be a TV screen display that will give you an estimate in terms of when the next bus is expected to arrive for whatever location you're going to. So definitely check that out if you are at a resort bus station. If you are staying at the resort and you are at that bus station, you can also use My Disney Experience. Unfortunately, for those that aren't staying at the resort, you won't be able to utilize this, but it's through My Disney Experience, and it will tell you the same thing that you basically see on the display at the bus station in terms of when the next bus is scheduled to arrive. There are bus stations outside of the main entrance of all 4 theme parks at Walt Disney World, and there's also a directory basically leading into the bus station, so make sure you check out that directory and look for the name of the resort that you are staying at. It will have a number next to it, and you essentially just go to the section that has that number, and that is where you will wait for your magical bus to arrive to take you back to your resort. Unfortunately, there are no screens that tell you when the next bus is expected to arrive at these stations, and there's nothing on My Disney Experience, no matter what, even if you're staying at Walt Disney World or not. There's nothing that will give you the estimate, but the good news is Disney does do their best to keep the buses coming pretty regularly, so hopefully you shouldn't have to wait too long. As far as the resort bus stations are concerned, every resort obviously has bus stations, but some have more than one. It depends on the size of the resort. So for example, Disney's Riviera Resort only has 1 bus station since it is a smaller resort, but Disney's Caribbean Beach Resort is a much larger resort and it has several bus stations. And there are some downsides to staying at a resort with several bus stations. So for example, if you were staying at Disney's Caribbean Beach and you were at the 3rd bus stop and the bus ended up getting filled to capacity at stops 1 and 2, then you're gonna have to wait for another bus as you're waiting at the 3rd bus station to come so that you can actually get on it to get to your destination. So the wait times could potentially be higher, and so a lot of people do view that as a downside. Another thing that a lot of people don't know is bus sharing is also very common for several of the resorts at Walt Disney World. So for example, when we were staying at Disney's Wilderness Lodge recently, the bus was shared with Disney's Contemporary Resort. So as we were on our way to the Magic Kingdom, we would stop at the Contemporary, and then we would go to the Magic Kingdom, and then at the end of the night, we would stop the Contemporary first, and then we would go back to Disney's Wilderness Lodge. So that's also not uncommon for Disney buses. So it's just another thing to keep in mind, and just set your expectations appropriately and make sure you give yourself plenty of travel time to get to essentially where you need to go. Another pro tip I have is related to the water parks. Right now, Disney has a promotion through the end of the year where you can go to a water park on your first day of your vacation if you want to, and a lot of people are taking advantage of that, which you should, because the water parks are a lot of fun, but it can be a little bit complicated to get there. This is something that Disney actually changes a lot, so I do recommend that you double check Disney's transportation page on their website or on your My Disney Experience app before you kind of make any plans of what this means for you and your resort. To put it into perspective just of how crazy things are right now, the way that Disney is currently doing it, for Disney's Blizzard Beach, a very few select resorts have direct access buses from the resorts, while most will have to go to Disney's Animal Kingdom. They will then have to get off the bus, transfer onto another bus, and then they will be able to get there. And for Disney's Typhoon Lagoon water park, none of the resorts have direct access currently, so everyone is having to take a Disney bus to Disney Springs, get off that bus, transfer, and then take another bus to get to the water park. So it is a little bit crazy right now, but it's still possible, so make sure you double check that transportation page, My Disney Experience, or you ask a cast member at your resort. So as you can tell, there are a lot of pros to utilizing the Disney bus system. Not only is it the most common way to get around, it's overall pretty easy, minus having to wait a little bit, just depending on how lucky you get in terms of when the next bus is going to arrive. But Disney also makes it extra magical. They add their Disney kind of magical touch to it, if you will. The bus drivers themselves are extra magical. They're super friendly. They typically will play loop music for you in terms of the theme of wherever you're going. So if you're going to Magic Kingdom, they'll play some Magic Kingdom tunes for you, which is really nice. They are air conditioned, so they are very comfortable, which is also a huge pro as well. But unfortunately, there are some considerations. The biggest, I would say, is the buses can get very crowded, especially during peak time. So in the morning and at the end of the evening, and they will pack those buses full. There will be absolutely no room. They have seats, which is great, but then after that, they fill it with standing room only. And after a long park day, that can be a little bit brutal. So yeah, just keep that in mind if you are utilizing the Disney bus system. It's not uncommon to have to stand the whole time and the whole drive away, and sometimes it's a long drive. So that part is probably, I would say, the biggest con of Disney buses. The other con is it does take a while most of the time to get to wherever you're trying to get. And so again, you just want to make sure you're budgeting that extra time, because you're really going to need it if you are utilizing the Disney bus system. All right, well, it's time for us to hop aboard our magical Disney bus at Disney's Riviera Resort to get to our next location. So I'll go show you what it looks like, and we'll go have some fun together at our next location.
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
We are currently at Disney's Ticket and Transportation Center, also known as TTC for short. You may be wondering how in the world I got here. So to recap, I took a bus from Disney's Riviera Resort to Disney's Magic Kingdom, and then I boarded a monorail to get to the TTC. So, since I just took a monorail, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the monorail. It is Disney World's most iconic form of Disney transportation, and as you can probably tell from my channel name, it's my personal favorite. I have a lot of nostalgia with the monorail, and so do many Disney fans. It's also so unique, it's scenic, and just a fun way to get around Walt Disney World. As far as the monorail is concerned, it is definitely a very popular way to get around. It actually transfers on average 150,000 guests a day, which is completely mind-blowing to me. It is not uncommon for the monorail to be crowded. I would say it's mostly during peak times when it's really crowded though, just like every other form of Disney transportation. So the morning and the evening, for example. The way it's set up is the cars have 2 benches on either side, and then there's a bunch of standing room in the middle. They have 2 silver poles to hold on to if you are someone who is standing and you're going to want to hold on, because it can be a little jerky. So as far as standing room only goes, it's not uncommon to have that in the morning and in the evenings, or during popular times in general. The monorail is completely free to use, just like all the other forms of Disney transportation we have covered so far today. And there are 3 separate monorail lines, and this really confuses people. So I want to take some time to explain the differences to all of you so that you can navigate it like a pro. The first one is the resort monorail line, and that line connects several of the resorts that are along the monorail line, as well as Disney's Magic Kingdom and the Ticket and Transportation Center. The resorts that are along the resort monorail line are Disney's Contemporary Resort, as well as Bay Lake Tower, which is the DVC property that is adjacent to the Contemporary. Then you also have Disney's Polynesian Resort, and of course the villas are included in that as well, which is the DVC side of the Polynesian, and the new Polynesian Tower is close enough to walk over to utilize the monorail, which is super convenient. And then you also have Disney's Grand Floridian Resort on the monorail line as well. So you go to all of those places. It kind kind of gives you what I like to call the grand circle tour of the monorail line if you are on that line. The resort monorail line typically starts running around 7 a.m. So if you want to take advantage of early theme park entry, you can absolutely do that. So that is super nice as well. The second line is the express monorail line, and this is very express, just like the name says. It only goes to the Ticket and Transportation Center, also known as the TTC, and Disney's Magic Kingdom. So only back and forth between those two locations. The third monorail line is the Epcot monorail line, and that one only goes between the Ticket and Transportation Center, also known as the TTC, and Epcot. And so that one really confuses a lot of people because the only way you can get to Epcot on the monorail is from the Ticket and Transportation Center. And a lot of people think that it may be connected to the resort line or the other express line, but that's not the case. You have to get off, you have to transfer, and then you have to get on the separate line to go to Epcot. The express monorail line typically starts running 30 minutes before early theme park entry, and the Epcot monorail line typically starts running anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour before early theme park entry. So that's something you are going to want to confirm with the resort that you're staying at or a cast member. They'll be able to give you the exact times for the day that you're here. One thing to know about the monorail is it will go down if the weather is bad, just like the Skyliners. So if there's lightning in the area or a really bad storm where there's a lot of winds or something like that, it may be down. But whenever that does happen, Disney does provide backup transportation, which is great. It's also occasionally down for mechanical issues. It is rather old, but it runs well for the most part considering its age, but that is a possibility. But whenever that happens, there will be backup options, so you have nothing to worry about. You may be wondering what Disney's Ticket and Transportation Center actually is, and this is considered the hub for transportation at Disney World. If you have a rental car or your own car and you're driving to Magic Kingdom, this is where you are going to park. If you are using a rideshare like Uber or Lyft, this is where you're going to be dropped off, and this is also where some off-property resorts that have transportation options will also drop you off. So there are several people that fall into the category of being dropped off here. If you are taking a Walt Disney World bus, then you will be dropped off at the front, and same with Minnie Vans, which we will get to later in this video. Let's talk about other things at the Ticket and Transportation Center that you can actually do. So you can take a monorail. This is the only spot where all three lines are available. And again, this is the exclusive area for that monorail line to Epcot. And so that's really valuable information to know. You can also take a ferry boat over to the Magic Kingdom, which we are going to talk about shortly. And it also has a little Joffrey's coffee stand. And if it's open, you can grab like a little coffee or another fancy drink or a little snack if you want. You can also technically buy tickets here, which is kind of like crazy for me to even think about sometimes because everything is really done online these days, but not everyone wants to do that, and so that's totally fine too. If you want to buy tickets in person, you can do that at the Ticket and Transportation Center as well. If you have a stroller and you are riding on the monorail, you can just roll the stroller right in and your child doesn't have to get out, which is super nice and super convenient. So that part is a huge pro for the monorail. If you have a wheelchair or an ECV, you can also roll it right in and you don't have to transfer or get out, which is also super convenient. In those instances, a cast member will bring a little ramp for you, so it's easy to get on and off. They'll ask you where you're getting off so they can make sure you also have a ramp when you get to wherever you are trying to get to, so you can easily get off as well. There are so many pros to the monorail at Walt Disney World. The first is that they come every 10 minutes, so pretty often, which is honestly really nice because you're likely not going to have to wait that long for another one to come by. It's also great if you want to do some resort hopping. Even if you just want to explore the resorts, that's great. If it's the holiday season, then it's even better because you can go see all of the really beautiful holiday decorations. But it's also great if you want to try out some different dining and restaurant locations as well. There are some great restaurants at all of the resorts along the monorail line, and it's really fun to be able to try those if you get the opportunity. I do recommend trying to pair it with your day at Magic Kingdom, just because it's super easy to hop out of Magic Kingdom, hop on to a monorail, and you are at your dining location before you know it. So that's also super convenient. Of course, with any form of Disney transportation, there are some considerations. I'd say the biggest one for me personally is that it can get very crowded, but so can all the forms of Disney transportation. So at the end of the night, you might have to wait for several monorails before you get on, and then once you get on, you're packed in like sardines. But again, that's pretty much every form of Disney transportation, and it's okay. It's just part of the overall experience.
Ahoy there, mates, and welcome aboard our Walt Disney World ferry boat.
We are about to board a ferry boat to head back to Disney's Magic Kingdom area. But before we do, I want to take the opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about this transportation option. The ferry boat is exactly that. It's a very large 2-story boat that will take you from the Ticket and Transportation Center over to Disney's Magic Kingdom. It's a very scenic and relaxing ride, and it is a great option, and I'm really glad that they have multiple to choose from here. If you have a stroller, you can just stroll it on in. You don't have to worry about collapsing it or anything like that, which is truly fantastic. If you are in a wheelchair or an ECV, you can also just roll right in as well, and you are good to go. So that's another huge pro when it comes to the ferry boat. The 2-story thing can get a little bit tricky when the capacity is a little bit fuller. They will ask those that can walk up the stairs, without strollers or wheelchairs, to go up to that second level so that as many people can fit on it as possible. And when the capacity isn't an issue, you can basically be wherever you want. So overall, it's a great option. It doesn't come quite as often as the monorails, and so I personally feel like most of the time, unless the monorail line is super long, which does happen sometimes, the monorail is the quickest way to get in. But the ferry boat, at the end of the night, when you're trying to get out, and so are so many other people, the ferry boat is the quickest. But that's just my opinion. I know some people may have, separate opinions on the topic, but I wanted to share that with you. The ferry boats typically start running anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes before the park opens, and it also stops running around 90 minutes after the parks close. So it does make it a great option if you are trying to get some extra magical time in Magic Kingdom before heading back to your car or your Uber or your Lyft. As far as the ferry boat is concerned, I feel like the biggest pro is that it's scenic, it's relaxing, and it can transfer a lot of people, making it a great option if you are trying to get somewhere from the TTC at a busy time. I would say the biggest con or consideration to take into account is that you are most likely going to be standing the whole time. There are a couple of benches, and if it's a low capacity time, then you can sit and it's all good. But they are reserved, obviously, for those that are needing them. And so at the end of the night, that's who will be sitting on those benches, and there's not very many of them, by the way. And so most likely you will be standing that whole time. And after you've done a full park day at Magic Kingdom, or maybe several days in several parks, you're pretty exhausted, and the last thing you want to do is stand. It's nice if you may potentially get lucky and get a seat on the bus. There are never guarantees, but it's pretty much guaranteed that on the ferry, if you are going on a high capacity time, you're going to be standing on your way. So something to consider. One pro tip I have for you is if you are staying at a Walt Disney World resort, I do not recommend that you drive to the Ticket and Transportation Center on your Magic Kingdom day. I also don't recommend that you Uber or Lyft unless you don't have another choice, simply because it's going to take you a lot longer to get into Magic Kingdom and kick off your magical day, and it's also going to take you a lot longer to get back to your car and do all of that nonsense. So if you have the option, I definitely recommend taking a Disney bus, because it will drop you off right in front of Magic Kingdom, or you can take a Minnie Van, which again, we're gonna talk about soon. So if possible, I do recommend that. Also, the parking lot is flat and it's super large, and it's a lot of walking to get to where you need to be. But Disney does have a courtesy tram that will take you back to different sections of the parking lot. It's broken out into villains and heroes, and so just make sure you know which one you're in. When you park, you definitely want to make sure you write down the exact section that you're in, and the number and the character and all of those things. Otherwise, you are going to totally forget where you are, and it's going to take you a long time to get back to your car. But the tram is really nice because you won't have to necessarily walk all the way back to your car. It makes that walk a lot shorter. So definitely take advantage of the tram if for some reason you do need to drive to Disney's Magic Kingdom.
We'll have you at your port of call in just a few minutes. Thanks for sailing with us.
Once we got to the Magic Kingdom resort area, I decided to hop aboard another watercraft to come to Disney's Wilderness Lodge Resort. And I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to showcase the other watercraft that Walt Disney World has. There is tons of water all around Walt Disney World, and that gives you several opportunities to take other types of watercraft to get from place to place, just depending on where you are going. So if you are in the Magic Kingdom area, you can take a boat to a couple of different resorts. So essentially that boat will go back and forth between Magic Kingdom and those resorts. The resorts that are along this loop are the Grand Floridian Resort and Spa, and then of course the Villa side, which is the DVC side. Also Disney's Polynesian Resort, as well as the Polynesian DVC Tower, Fort Wilderness Resort and Campground, and then of course Wilderness Lodge and the DVC sides of Wilderness Lodge, which are Boulder Ridge Villas and Copper Creek Villas. There is another watercraft line that goes between Epcot and Hollywood Studios for select resorts as well. The resorts that are along that line are the Boardwalk Inn and of course the Villa side, which is the DVC side of the resort, Beach Club Resort and the Villa side, which is also the DVC side of that resort, Yacht Club Resort, and the Walt Disney World Swan Hotel and the Walt Disney World Dolphin Hotel. Some resorts also have exclusive watercraft access directly to Disney Springs, so that line goes between those select resorts and to Disney Springs. Those resorts are Port Orleans Resort French Quarter, Port Orleans Resort Riverside, Old Key West, and Saratoga Springs Resort and Spa. There is also a separate boat line that connects some of the Walt Disney World resorts together. The resorts along that line are the Contemporary, Fort Wilderness, and Wilderness Lodge, along with obviously all of the DVC sides of those resorts as well. The boat schedule for the other watercraft can vary, so I advise that you check in with your resort. It's usually posted at the dock as well, depending on the resort that you're staying at if you are curious. As far as how often the boats come, it's usually every 15 to 30 minutes. It's pretty often, and so it's really nice, and it's a huge pro if you are staying at one of those resorts because you just have easy access to another park or potentially Disney Springs, and you can't beat easy transportation options. There are several types of boats that Disney does use for these watercraft options. Some are definitely smaller, like lower to the water kind of boats. They're beautiful, but they're just different. And then some are more like enclosed kind of boats, if you will, and they're like larger. It just depends on what Disney is using at that time. And so it's kind of like a roll of the dice situation. So with that being said, it depends on the boat on if the strollers need to be folded or not. Some of them can roll on, but I'd say most of them do need to be folded. So I would just expect that that's the case and then be pleasantly surprised if you don't have to fold it, just for your awareness. And then of course, ECVs and wheelchairs are accessible as well for most of the boats, but again, not all of the boats. And so it gets a little bit tricky when that comes into play, but if that does happen, then you usually just have to wait for the next boat to come, because usually Disney uses a wide variety of boats and they kind of rotate between the ones that they're using. I'm sure you can guess this, but when the weather is bad, Disney will close the boats for safety. So if there's lightning in the area, if it's really windy, or if it's downpouring rain, then Disney will close the boats. But of course, just like everything else that we talked about, there will be backup transportation available if this does happen. And this is another free option for everybody to use, so I do want to mention that as well. As far as pros, honestly, it is so relaxing and it's so scenic, and the boats are mostly beautiful here. And so I do really love it. We like to stay at Disney's Wilderness Lodge because of the boat access to Magic Kingdom. It's a really easy way to get back and forth. We never wait for boats for that long, and it's just a beautiful and relaxing way to start and end your day. So we love the boats. I would say as far as considerations are concerned, there really aren't many, unless you are in an ECV or a wheelchair, and you might have to wait a little bit extra for an accessible boat for you to get on. I guess if you get seasick or if boats bother you, maybe some of the smaller boats might be problematic, but honestly, I'm someone who's susceptible to seasickness and they don't bother me. So I hope that helps. If the land is more your speed, then you may want to consider a Minnie Van, which is an exclusive car service at Walt Disney World Resort. A lot of people like them for several reasons, but one of the biggest fun reasons is because of the theming. It's a bright red SUV with white polka dots, so it's themed after Minnie Mouse, which is clever because the name is a Minnie Van. So that alone is just a fun reason to want to use one while you're on your trip. Another reason that people really do like them is because they are driven by Walt Disney World cast members. So a lot of people feel like they are safer than something like an Uber or a Lyft, for example, which makes a lot of sense. Another reason that people love them is because they have car seat options. And as far as the car seat configurations, they have everything. They have car seats that can be forward facing, rear facing. They also have booster seats with and without a back. So they have everything under the sun that you could possibly need. And each car can hold up to 6 people and has the capacity to hold up to 2 car seats. So that is fantastic. And another great reason why parents love using them is because of safety. Minnie Vans are not the cheapest option. They are a flat fee of $22 plus an additional cost per mile. So you can request one using the Lyft app, which is nice because a lot of people already have that or don't mind installing that. And it will give you an estimate before you request it, so you can see if it's something that you're willing to pay or not pay, depending on where you're going and what time it is and all the normal factors that the rideshare services usually take into account. Anytime is a good time to use a minivan if you ask me, if it's in your budget, of course, but there are some times where I recommend it more than others. One example is when you're trying to get from resort to resort, because that's a little bit tricky when you are utilizing Disney transportation. Another one is if you have an early morning breakfast reservation at a park or resort. It's just super convenient to be able to take the minivan exactly where you need to go. Another great time to use one is if you are headed to or from Magic Kingdom. The reason for this is because they can drop you up front where the buses actually drop you off, so you don't have to deal with the ticket and transportation center, which is a huge pro because you can get in and out of Magic Kingdom so much faster. And the other is if you are going to Hoop-de-Doo Review at the campgrounds. I do recommend it because of how messy the transportation options are over there. It can be really tricky to actually get to Hoop-de-Doo Review. That is a dinner show for those that don't know, and it's super fun and super cute, but it's really hard to get to. So a minivan is great because they have that exclusive access to get you exactly where you need to go. If you have a wheelchair or an ECV, there are accessible minivan options that you can select as well. When you're requesting one through the Lyft app, just make sure you hit one of the accessible minivan options and they will send one your way. The minivans are available from 6:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. They are a safe, a convenient, a fast, and a fun way to get around Walt Disney World Resort if it is in your budget to do so. It's very magical and it feels very deluxe. There is another way you can get around the lands, and I'm going to cover that next. The last option I wanted to discuss has to do with rental cars or driving your own car. I know this is technically not Walt Disney World transportation, but I get asked this so frequently that I wanted to cover it with you. So if you drive your own car or if you have a rental car and you are staying at a Walt Disney World resort, you can park at the resort for free and you can park at the parks for free. If you're staying off-site and you're driving your own car or you have a rental car, then you are going to have to pay to park at all 4 theme parks at Walt Disney World. The price for parking at the parks is $30 for standard parking and anywhere from $45 to $55 for preferred parking. So it can add up extremely quickly, and that's obviously a huge downside if you do have your own car. The other thing is you'll probably have to park pretty far away, meaning you're going to have a lot of extra steps added onto your day when you first get there, and then once you're exhausted leaving after a long park day, you're going to be walking pretty far. You're going to want to make sure that you write down where you parked. You definitely want to know the section and the number and everything you need to know so that you can easily get to your park at the end of the day, because you will forget where you parked. You can either write it down, I like to personally text it to myself, or you can save it in your My Disney Experience app. So there are lots of convenient ways to keep track of where your car is. One thing is if you don't want to walk, you can take the courtesy tram up to the front of the park if you're willing to wait for that. And then at the end of the night, you can take it back. But again, the lines can sometimes be long at the end of the night. Another thing to note is if you do have a stroller, you do have to fold it in order to get onto the tram. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of people ask me, do I need a rental car for my trip to Walt Disney World Resort? And my answer to that is no, you really don't need one at all. You can see why by everything we discussed. There are so many options and there are so many easy and effective ways to get around property. And if you want something that's a little bit more direct or a little bit more effective, you can always rent a minivan, or you can just utilize Uber and Lyft if you want a cheaper option. So I really do not think you need a rental car if you are staying at a Walt Disney World Resort. If you have any questions about the transportation at Walt Disney World Resort, feel free to drop them below and I will get back to you. If you have been to Walt Disney World before, I'd love to hear what is your favorite mode of Disney transportation, and also feel free to share any advice you have, any lessons you learned in the comments. It's always so fun when we get to learn from one another, and I always love hearing from you. If you enjoyed today's video or if you found it helpful, it would mean so much to me if you'd consider subscribing, liking, and hitting that bell notification to be notified for future videos. I exclusively post about Disney parks and planning content to help you have the most magical trip possible. A huge heartfelt thank you to all of my patrons, because without them, this channel would not exist. If you would like to join us and get more exclusive behind the scenes content from me, then the link to join us will be in the description below. Until next time, I'm Kenzie. See you real soon.